Hey, it's Soul, and welcome back to another episode of Warcraft Weekly, the show that once again survived to the next chapter. Let's get to the number one highlight of the week. Shadowlands patch 9.1.5 is coming in less than 2 weeks on the week of November 2nd. There's a lot coming, and next week I'm going to have a last-minute slacker guide to help you understand what is happening when the patch drops, so you're going to be as prepared as you feel like being. This patch has been a long time coming, just like how for some folks patch 10.0 is a long time coming. With this release date, 9.1.5 will have been an 18-week wait, 126 days, making it the longest wait for a patch in the past 5 or so years, but still short of the typical end of expansion lull, which is still pretty bad. And it hasn't helped that over the course of this patch, Blizzard and the World of Warcraft team have been taking a beating, notably with the California lawsuit that extinguished a lot of the remaining good faith from fans. When you're counting the hours and days, the wait can feel pretty slow. When you're regularly badgered by people on the internet saying that you suck for still playing WoW and Blizzard games, the wait can feel even slower. But a lot has happened to the gaming landscape over the past few months. Thankfully, I've got wonderful folks like you to share some positive energy with, and you can do so too by liking this video.
Let's do it, Algorithm Squad, boop it.
Let's give a courtesy nod to the conspiracy heads out there pointing out that Legion Timewalking, which is starting early December, 1 month after the patch, is somehow being positioned against the upcoming Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker expansion, which releases November 23rd. Rabid fans pointed out that the Legion Timewalking release conflicts with 14's launch window. Now I'm pulling data straight out my ass, but I imagine that most people who've dipped out of WoW to try out 14 are nowhere near ready to take on the latest expansion. Endwalker's launch would have less of an impact on them and more on their returning players or people like me who rush to the end, and really there's no need to rush. People who are fully invested into Final Fantasy XIV aren't even gonna look back anyway. And if these people are right, and it's been Blizzard's insidious plan to get in the way of Endwalker's launch, they must have known about the launch date years in advance. That way the Timewalking schedule would just kind of naturally fall into Legion just in time for their patch release and someone else's expansion launch? Right now we're in Mist of Pandaria Timewalking. Next month it's Warlords of Draenor Timewalking, and December would have been the first Legion Timewalking no matter what. But what if, Soul? What if? Bro. Opinion time, but there's gotta be some, I don't know, insecurity there, feeling threatened by a patch. I have joked that the WoW team could have started Timewalking the week of the Endwalker launch, oh, that would have been good. And if we step back even further, come on, isn't this WoW versus 14 tribalism getting a little bit out of hand? It's like a crappy version of Nintendo versus Sega, or PlayStation versus Xbox, or PC versus console, although we know that's not really a contest.
We need not concern ourselves with the cries of the rabble.
I've made my own missteps with the coverage of the game, and I've learned from it. The biggest lesson? There's no shame wanting to enjoy gaming wherever that journey takes you. Okay, maybe there's a little bit of envy because some people have way more time on their hands than others, but Endwalker is going to be great. It'll probably break more than a few records, and I'm gonna play it, but I'm also gonna farm the crap out of Shadowlands, and because there are way too many appearances to get with much less waiting, just, this incredible grind, I'm pretty good with that. Speaking of Timewalking, it turns out that the WoW team is putting Timewalking on a more fixed schedule with a guaranteed 3-week gap between each event. Whoop-de-freaking-do. So the feedback has got them on a slightly shorter schedule, but with more consistency. However, I would like your thoughts on this because as usual, I'm all over the place. I do want Timewalking to be more frequent and available, but I don't know if I would want it constantly because then it would feel too much like a feature, a progression step, and in that headspace, I think that Timewalking would be pretty useless because, well, I could just pick up Korthia gear or whatever. That's why if you've seen me talk about Timewalking frequency, I tend to come forward with a compromise, like a 2-week gap between events, or in the case of what's happening in the patch, make Timewalking events always 2 weeks long, all the time. I would love for you folks to chime in on this, but very important, when sharing, I want you to just think about your wants and needs and not what you think is best for the game. The build this week, which is a release candidate, is, as you would expect, pretty light. The Soul Twining Crescent has a higher likelihood of dropping, yay. The follower experience token introduced last week has been buffed pretty considerably though. It now boosts your follower all the way up to level 30. That's the equivalent of about 35,000 experience. I think this is a pretty good change, not only because the value got a big buff, but because this clearly communicates what the item is intended to do. There's still another full week until the patch drops, meaning we'll hopefully see some last minute polish and bug fixes, but with the current schedule, there's a lot of time time to iterate a bit on the Legion Timewalking events. We've had 24 hours to check out the Mage Tower challenge, and here's what we're finding so far. For the most part, it seems as challenging as it was so many years ago. What's a bit special is that expansion features are fully disabled, so no soulbinds or covenant abilities, and no old features like the Heart of Azeroth. That's not going to work either. However, other Timewalking rules still apply, like old legendaries and trinkets, and little ways to cheese itemization, like having old gear with lots of gem slots and legacy enchants. So it's not going to be pure skill that gets us through the challenges, but at least it's not as bad as like having to grind BFA content. Now, while it's obviously too soon to talk about 9.2, there is new information that suggests the next major patch for WoW is going to be pushed back another month, and that's because the Sylvanas book, which was already pushed back from November to late February, is now going to hit stores and marketplaces March 22nd. Many fans, including myself, have speculated that the release of the book heavily coincides with in-game events, so the timing's got to be just right. Although there could be numerous reasons for the delay, including minor changes to the story, which would require rewrites as well as re-recordings for the audiobook version. Not to mention the very apparent delays in everything thanks to the pandemic, which has caused issues and delays at nearly every level of production across pretty much every industry. I'm still very much leaning towards the theory that, well, they just want to time the release just right, but I thought I would bring up a little bit of obvious reality too. And in WoW Classic news, the Season of Mastery beta is up and running, giving testers a taste of abridged and maybe more difficult WoW Classic content. The gem that I want to highlight today is the WoW team's take on the Ironman challenge. It's coming to Classic. For those who aren't familiar, World of Warcraft players drummed up their own sort of hardcore mode with various handicaps, including having no deaths on their record. What's being done here in the Season of Mastery is that you can talk to an NPC and give yourself a kind of buff as long as your character has no deaths on their record. So it doesn't matter if you pick this buff up at a low level or max level, you still need those 0 deaths. And I think this is really cool, and that there's so much potential here that I really hope the team builds on. Other handicaps of the player-made Ironman challenge include never grouping up with anybody, only wearing common gear, not using consumables, never entering a dungeon or an instance, and so on and so forth. If later on they introduce additional buffs that correspond to each of these handicaps, players can then sort of, handcraft their Ironman experience, set their difficulty in a certain way, and then at max level, celebrate their victory in town. Of course, I can imagine a whole bunch of shenanigans too, like what if I was a paladin and I were to find one of these people, and I happen to train a bunch of mobs to get to them, and then I heal that person, or I drag mobs into their AoE or something, and then I bubble hearth. Wow, definitely messed up, but what do you think? Like, should this sort of thing be brought to modern WoW too? And now for the non-WoW Blizzard Entertainment news that you just love to hear. A recent article from the Financial Times is showing some signs of improvement within the company. Too bad the article is behind a paywall, thanks. In an interview with executive Frances Townsend, more than 20 individuals have been fired for misconduct and another 20 are facing disciplinary action, with more changes promised to come. She points out that a distinction was made between patterns of misconduct which warranted immediate termination and one-off instances which may be rectified with disciplinary action and training. On top of this, an internal letter to staff reveals a number of actions executive leadership is taking to satisfy part of the 4 demands made by Blizzard staff. These actions include expanding their ethics and compliance team, making it more independent from other business segments, and tripling their investment in training resources. The problem isn't exactly with the message, but more like the messenger. Townsend is the executive who infamously dismissed the Blizzard lawsuit when news of it first broke, calling it a meritless and irresponsible lawsuit, which in retrospect is, well, it's kind of half true now, after more recently learning of the California government's mishandling of this whole case, which might result in everything being thrown out, but that's a different story. The point is that Townsend's statements caused a lot of backlash and put a target on her back, with many calling for her to be ejected from the company, going as far to say, and I'm paraphrasing here, that even if the likes of her and Bobby Kotick aren't being directly implicated in the allegations, their handling and initial messaging are cause for dismissal. So they're trying to turn these two into scapegoats. Torches and pitchforks are being waved around in the hopes that their ejections will, immediately result in a Blizzard utopia, where harassment and poor treatment of workers will suddenly end. Toxicity is gone from the gaming industry as a whole, StarCraft Ghost will release, and WoW will get player housing. I imagine this is the same mindset from critics who saw the quest and emote changes in 915 and think that, oh, this is all Blizzard was up to. You know, there's a kind of big picture to all of this. The last thing that I want to add are specifically the 4 demands from ABK workers mentioned before, just one effort to help their voices to be heard over our own headcanon. 1. An end to forced arbitration in employment agreements. 2. The adoption of inclusive recruitment and hiring practices. 3. Increases in pay transparency through compensation metrics. And 4. An audit of ABK policies and practices to be performed by a neutral third party, chosen by an employee-led diversity, equity, and inclusion task force. And that's the show. I wanted to tuck my Mage Tower feedback all the way back here and share my thoughts. I like it. I haven't been back there since the first time I beat down Cruel like years ago, back in patch 7.2, and I never really did it on any other class. I was only slightly worried that not having any artifact weapon or Tyleka's pants or Sephuz's ring or Bear Tartar or whatever would work against me, but in this 24-hour period I saw that things worked out pretty well. I mean, it still felt like a pretty fresh experience. I didn't clear it during the test, but I did get close a few times. However, I think the biggest pain point comes from my own self-healing as a protection paladin, because back in the day we had Light of the Protector as our self-heal and I could pop that like whenever it was off the global. Today I've got to think it over a little bit thanks to Holy Power, and that Word of Glory is on the global cooldown, but I still got close, and I'm confident that with a bit more practice and my actual UI I'll probably nail it. And I think it'll be a lot of fun for everyone else too. Like, you don't even need to be max level to take it on, and for those who want a bit less of a challenge, they can take the time to optimize their time walking gear in time for when the event rolls back around. It's too bad about this wait though. I mean, it's a month after the patch drops and then like 18 weeks between events. I say that we keep trying to chip away at the WoW team's resolved and demand a shorter schedule, and why that works for you, maybe we'll see a change out of that. So I want to give a huge thanks to everyone who joined us for today, from the newcomers to the regulars, to the good old folks at Twitch for keeping each other company, to Drixie for stepping it up, and to our newest patron, Gail. Thank you very much. Be sure to tune in every Tuesday through Thursday for some Coffee with Soul. The times and the address are, well, they're somewhere on the screen. Don't forget to like the video to please the algorithm gods. Subscribe for more, and let's get out of here. Until next week, folks, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.